The crystalline spires of the royal palace pierced the amber sky of Vexham, homeworld of the mighty Vesh Empire. Inside these gleaming walls, Princess Lyra sat alone by her window, watching warrior ships return from their latest conquest. Her slender frame and pale blue skin made her look delicate even by human standards. Among the muscular, towering Vesh, she was considered tragically weak. A fit of coughing seized her body. The royal physicians had no cure for her condition, a rare genetic disorder that left her muscles underdeveloped and her lungs struggling for air on this high-gravity world. She pressed a cloth to her mouth until the spasm passed. "The king demands your presence, princess," announced a guard at her door. Lyra sighed. Her father rarely summoned her unless to express disappointment or to parade her before visiting dignitaries as an example of why genetic purity mattered. She followed the guard through the winding corridors, her steps careful and measured to conserve energy. The throne room stretched before her, its ceiling lost in shadows high above. King Drax sat upon his massive throne, his purple battle armor gleaming. At 10 feet tall, he towered over most Vesh. His skin was deep indigo, a sign of pure royal bloodlines. "Daughter," he rumbled, his voice echoing through the chamber, "I have brought you a gift from our newest conquest." Lyra bowed her head. "Thank you, father." "The humans of planet Earth have surrendered to our might," he continued. "Their bodies are weak, but some show useful skills. I have selected one to serve you." At a signal from the king, guards dragged forward a man in tattered clothing. Though his hands were bound, he stood straight, eyes defiantly scanning the room. By human standards, he was tall and strong, but among the Vesh, he looked small and fragile. "This is a warrior from their armies," the king explained. "His name is Marcus. He will attend to your needs. Perhaps having someone even weaker than yourself will help you appreciate your royal blood." Lyra studied the human with curiosity. His skin was tan, his hair dark and short. Unlike the uniform blue to purple hues of Vesh skin, humans came in many colors. This fascinated her. "He has been fitted with a translator collar and understands our expectations," the king continued. "If he disobeys, you need only press this." He handed Lyra a small device. "It will cause him pain." Marcus flinched slightly at these words, but kept his face neutral. His eyes met Lyra's briefly, and she saw something unexpected there. Not fear or hatred, but calculation. This human was assessing his situation, looking for advantages. "Thank you, father," Lyra said quietly. "I will make good use of him." The king waved dismissively. "Take your pet and go. I have important matters to discuss with my generals." Guards pushed Marcus forward, then removed his restraints. He rubbed his wrists but made no aggressive moves. With a respectful nod to the king, Lyra turned and walked slowly from the throne room. Marcus followed several paces behind. Back in her private chambers, Lyra turned to face the human. Up close, he was less intimidating than she had feared. His eyes were brown with flecks of green, colors no Vesh possessed. "You don't need that device," Marcus said, nodding toward the pain controller in her hand. Lyra startled at his direct address. Servants never spoke unless spoken to. "I won't harm you," he continued. "I'm not stupid. I know my situation." "You speak our language well," she observed. "Your translator helps." He tapped the metal collar around his neck. "But I've been learning since I was captured. I like to understand my enemies." Lyra set the control device on a table. "Am I your enemy?" Marcus studied her for a moment. "I don't know yet. Are you?" A smile touched Lyra's lips, the first genuine one in months. "No, I don't think I am." She gestured to a chair. "Please sit. You must be tired." Marcus hesitated, surprised by the courtesy, then sat carefully. "Your father said you were weak, but weakness comes in many forms. From what I've seen so far, physical strength isn't everything." Lyra looked at him with new interest. "No human has ever entered the royal palace before. What will you do now that you're here?" "Survive," Marcus answered simply. For now, that's enough. Neither realized in that moment how much more than survival awaited them both. 3 weeks passed in the Crystal Palace. Marcus learned the routines of Princess Lyra's quiet life. Each morning, he brought her breakfast, special foods prepared to help with her condition. Then he would assist her with daily tasks that strained her limited strength. Today, he found her attempting to reach a book on a high shelf. Her thin arms trembled with the effort. "Allow me," Marcus said, easily retrieving the thick volume. "Thank you," Lyra said, taking the book. It was filled with star charts and planetary information. "I study other worlds. It's the closest I can get to visiting them." Marcus nodded. "You don't leave the palace much." "Father says it's dangerous for me." She sat in her favorite chair by the window. "The other Vesh would see my weakness. Some might challenge me just to prove how pathetic the king's daughter is." Marcus frowned. "That's cruel. It's our way. Strength matters above all else to the Vesh." As Lyra opened her book, Marcus noticed small notes written in the margins. Her observations were detailed and intelligent. This princess was no fool, despite how others treated her. "What is Earth like?" she asked suddenly. "Is it beautiful?" Marcus leaned against the wall. "Parts of it are. We have oceans and mountains, deserts and forests, cities that shine at night." "And your people? Are they all warriors like you?" "I'm not really a warrior," Marcus admitted. "I was a military engineer. I built things, fixed things. The Vesh didn't care about the difference when they took me." Lyra looked up with interest. "You build things. What kinds of things?" "Bridges, shelters, communication systems. Humans don't have the natural strength of the Vesh, so we create tools to help us." "That's fascinating," Lyra said, eyes brightening. "The Vesh rarely invent new things. We take what we want from conquered worlds." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lord Krell, one of the king's advisors. The tall, muscular Vesh entered without knocking, his face twisted with disgust when he saw Marcus standing freely in the room. "Princess, why isn't your pet properly restrained?" Krell demanded. "He doesn't need restraints," Lyra replied quietly. "He helps me willingly." Krell laughed, a harsh sound. "Humans are treacherous creatures. This one will slit your throat while you sleep." Marcus kept his face neutral, though anger burned inside him. He'd witnessed how these mighty warriors treated those they considered beneath them. "Marcus has shown me nothing but respect," Lyra said, her voice gaining a rare firmness. "The king sent me to check on your well-being," Krell sneered. "I'll inform him you've grown attached to your pet. Perhaps he should be replaced with a more suitable servant." As Krell stepped closer to Marcus, Lyra rose from her chair. "You will do no such thing," she said. Though her voice remained soft, something in her tone made Krell pause. "Marcus belongs to me now. Father gave him to me. Are you questioning the king's decision?" Krell's eyes narrowed. "Of course not, Princess. I merely concern myself with your safety." "My safety is not your concern," Lyra replied. "You may go." After Krell left, Marcus looked at Lyra with new respect. "Thank you for defending me." Lyra sat back down, suddenly exhausted by the confrontation. "It was nothing. It wasn't nothing. Not to me." Marcus studied her thoughtfully. "You're stronger than they think." "Don't be foolish," she said. "I can barely walk across the palace without resting." "There are different kinds of strength," Marcus said. "On Earth, we have a saying, 'The reed that bends in the wind survives the storm better than the mighty oak that breaks.'" Lyra considered this. "What does it mean?" "It means flexibility and adaptability can be more valuable than raw power. The Vesh value only one kind of strength, but humans have learned to be strong in many different ways." Lyra's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Will you tell me more about these different strengths?" Marcus smiled. "I'll do better than that. If you're willing, I could show you." "Show me what?" "How to be strong in the human way." For the first time since he'd met her, Lyra looked truly excited. "Yes," she said. "I would like that very much." As the twin sons of Vexum sat outside her window, princess and servant began making plans that would change both their lives forever. Again, Marcus said softly, "Move your weight from the back foot to the front." Princess Lyra stepped forward carefully, her slender arm extending in a controlled striking motion. They were in her private garden, a small enclosed space where no other Vesh ventured. It was early morning, and the pink light of dawn cast long shadows through the alien foliage. "Better," Marcus nodded. "Remember, it's not about power. It's about leverage and precision." For 2 months now, they had met here every morning. Marcus had adapted human martial arts to work with Lyra's limitations. The Vesh fought with brute strength, overwhelming opponents with their superior size and power. But humans had centuries of combat techniques designed for smaller fighters facing larger enemies. Lyra completed the sequence of movements, then paused to catch her breath. Though still frail by Vesh standards, her stamina had improved noticeably. "Why did you decide to help me?" she asked, looking at Marcus. He considered the question. "At first, it was a way to pass time. Then I saw how they treated you, and it reminded me of how the Vesh treat humans. And now I think you might surprise them all someday." Marcus smiled, ready to continue. Their session ended when Lyra's personal physician arrived for her daily examination. The old Vesh doctor, Mev, was one of the few who treated Lyra with genuine kindness. "Your readings have improved again," Mev said, checking her monitoring device. "Your lung capacity has increased by 8% since last month." "Is that significant?" Lyra asked. "Very. I've never seen such improvement in someone with your condition." Mev glanced at Marcus, who stood quietly in the corner. "Whatever changes you've made to your routine, I suggest continuing them." After Mev left, Lyra could barely contain her excitement. "Did you hear that? The exercises are working." Marcus nodded. "Your body is adapting. That's what humans do best. We adapt." "I want to learn more," Lyra said. "Not just fighting techniques. Tell me about human strategy and thinking." Marcus glanced at the door to ensure they were alone. The Vesh believe conquest is the only path to greatness. Humans learn that cooperation often works better. We combine different strengths to overcome greater challenges. "Is that why Earth fell to the Vesh? Because you cooperated instead of fought?" A shadow crossed Marcus's face. "No, Earth fell because we weren't united enough. We still fought among ourselves when the Vesh arrived." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a royal messenger. "Princess, your presence is required in the throne room immediately." Lyra exchanged a worried glance with Marcus before following the messenger. In the throne room, King Drax sat with his war council. Maps of distant star systems hovered in the air before them. "Daughter," the king acknowledged her with minimal interest. "Lord Krell tells me your human servant has been teaching you things." Lyra's heart raced. Had they been discovered? "Yes, father. Stories about Earth, mostly. Their cultures and history." Krell's eyes narrowed. "I saw them in the garden this morning." The human was showing her fighting movements. The king laughed. "Fighting, my daughter." The other council members joined in his mockery. "It's just exercise, father," Lyra said quickly, "to help with my breathing." "And has it helped?" the king asked, suddenly curious. "Dr. Mev says my condition has improved." This silenced the laughter. King Drax studied his daughter more carefully than he had in years. "Interesting. Perhaps the human has some use after all." Krell stepped forward. "My king, allowing a prisoner to train the princess in human combat techniques seems unwise." "Silence," the king commanded. "If my daughter grows stronger under the human's guidance, I see no problem. She remains the weakest Vesh in the palace. What harm can come from her learning a few human tricks?" Lyra lowered her eyes to hide her growing determination. "Thank you, father. You may continue these exercises," the king said dismissively. "Now leave us. We have war plans to discuss." Back in her chambers, Marcus waited anxiously. When Lyra told him what happened, he released a breath he'd been holding. "They underestimate you," he said quietly. "That's good." "Good? My father thinks I'm harmless." Marcus smiled. "On Earth, we have another saying. The most dangerous opponent is the one you don't see coming." Lyra straightened her shoulders slightly. "Then we continue." "We continue," Marcus agreed. "And we add something new to your training." "What?" "Strategy." His eyes glinted with determination. "If you're going to surprise them all, you'll need more than physical skills. You'll need to think like a human warrior." The grand hall of the palace buzzed with activity as servants prepared for the arrival of House Brax, one of the most powerful noble families in the Vesh Empire. Princess Lyra watched from a balcony, hidden behind a column. "They bring their son, Prince Torque," she whispered to Marcus, who stood beside her. "He's known as the finest young warrior in 3 star systems." Marcus studied the preparations below. "Why are you nervous about this visit?" "Torque has always mocked me. Last time he visited, I was too weak to leave my bed." Lyra's hands tightened on the railing. "He called me a stain on the royal bloodline." After 6 months of training, Lyra had grown stronger, but she still appeared fragile compared to other Vesh. Only those closest to her would notice the subtle changes: her improved posture, steadier breathing, and the calculating look that now often appeared in her eyes. "Remember what we discussed about opponents like him," Marcus said quietly. "Arrogance creates blind spots." The sound of horns announced the arrival of House Brax. King Drax sat upon his throne as the visitors entered the hall. Lord Brax led the procession, followed by his son Torque, a towering young Vesh with dark purple skin and muscles that bulged beneath his ceremonial armor. "Your Majesty," Lord Brax bowed, "we are honored by your invitation." The king nodded in acknowledgement. "The honor is mine. Your son's reputation grows with each passing season." Prince Torque stepped forward, his chest swelling with pride. "I have defeated 17 champions in ritual combat this year alone, Your Majesty." "Impressive," the king said. "Perhaps you will demonstrate your skills during your stay." "I would be delighted," Torque replied. Then, scanning the hall, he asked, "And where is your daughter, the princess? I hope her health permits her to join us." Something in his tone made Marcus tense. There was mockery hidden beneath the polite words. Lyra took a deep breath and stepped out from her hiding place. "I am here, Prince Torque." All eyes turned to her as she descended the stairs to the main floor. Marcus followed several steps behind, as was proper for a servant. "Princess Lyra," Torque bowed dramatically, "you look slightly less frail than when last we met." Lyra smiled thinly. "Thank you for noticing. I have been working to improve my strength." Torque laughed. "Have you indeed? Perhaps you'll soon be ready for your proving challenge." The king shifted uncomfortably on his throne. The proving challenge was a ceremonial combat test that all royal Vesh children underwent upon reaching maturity. King Drax had delayed Lyra's challenge indefinitely, knowing she would fail. "My daughter focuses on scholarly pursuits," the king said dismissively. "The proving challenge is unnecessary for her position." "But my king," Torque said with false concern, "tradition requires it. Without passing the challenge, can she truly be considered a royal heir?" A tense silence fell over the hall. Marcus watched carefully, recognizing the political trap being set. House Brax was maneuvering to embarrass the royal family. "I will take the proving challenge," Lyra announced clearly. Gasps echoed through the hall. King Drax rose from his throne. "Daughter, you forget yourself. This is not your decision to make." "Forgive me, father," Lyra said, keeping her eyes lowered respectfully. "But Prince Torque is correct. Tradition requires it, and I would not dishonor our family by avoiding my duty." The king stared at his daughter in disbelief. Lord Brax smiled smugly, while Torque barely contained his delight at the prospect. "Then it's settled," Torque declared. I would be honored to stand as the princess's opponent in the challenge. That is not traditional, the king objected. The challenge is normally against a trained instructor, not a visiting noble. But it is permitted, Lord Brax interjected. And what better way to strengthen the bonds between our houses? Trapped by protocol and tradition, King Drax had no choice but to agree. The proving challenge will take place in 3 days' time. As the gathering dispersed, Torque passed close to Lyra. I'll try not to humiliate you completely, princess, he whispered. Perhaps just a few broken bones to remember me by. Later, in Lyra's chambers, Marcus paced anxiously. This is happening too soon. We needed more time. Lyra sat calmly, reviewing a datapad containing human combat strategies. We don't have more time. This is our opportunity. Torque could kill you, Marcus warned. He won't hold back. Lyra looked up, a determined glint in her eyes. Good. Neither will I. The combat arena gleamed under the harsh light of Vexum's twin suns, circular in design, with high walls of polished stone. It had witnessed countless proving challenges over the centuries. Today, it was filled to capacity. Every noble house had sent representatives to witness what many expected would be a humiliating defeat for the royal family. In the preparation chamber beneath the arena, Lyra stood quietly as attendants fitted her with traditional combat armor. The lightweight metal plates were still heavy for her slender frame. Marcus watched from the corner, his face carefully blank despite his concern. Remember everything we practiced, he said softly when the attendants stepped away. His strength is also his weakness. Lyra nodded. I remember. The door opened and King Drax entered. For the first time in Lyra's memory, her father looked uncertain. Daughter, he said, his voice low. There is still time to withdraw. I can cite your health condition. Lyra straightened her shoulders. And confirm what everyone already believes, that I am too weak to be your heir. Better that than to be injured or killed for pride. It's not about pride, father. Lyra adjusted her armor straps. It's about finding a different kind of strength. The king frowned at Marcus. Has this human filled your head with foolish ideas? He has opened my eyes, Lyra replied. Today, I will open yours. Before the king could respond, trumpets sounded above. It was time. The crowd roared as Torque entered the arena, his massive frame gleaming with polished armor. He raised his arms in triumph before even a single blow had been struck. When Lyra emerged from the opposite entrance, the noise dimmed to curious murmurs, then scattered laughter. She looked tiny against the vast stone circle. Even with her recent improvements, she remained frail by Vesh standards. Against Prince Torque, she appeared almost childlike. The ceremonial master stepped forward. The proving challenge tests the royal heir's worthiness through combat. Victory comes through surrender or incapacitation. Death is not the goal, but risks are accepted by both participants. Torque grinned at Lyra across the arena. I'll accept your surrender anytime, princess. Lyra said nothing, her mind recalling Marcus's lessons. Don't waste energy on talk. Don't respond to provocations. Study your opponent's movements. Find the patterns. The master struck the ceremonial gong, and the challenge began. Torque charged immediately, expecting to end the match with one powerful tackle. Lyra waited until the last possible moment, then stepped aside with a precise movement. Using Torque's momentum against him, she guided his charge with the lightest touch, sending him stumbling forward. The crowd gasped. Recovering quickly, Torque turned with a growl. Lucky dodge. He attacked again, this time with more control. Lyra blocked his first strike, redirecting his force rather than meeting it directly. She countered with a precise strike to a pressure point Marcus had identified in Vesh anatomy. Torque's left arm momentarily went numb. Disbelief crossed his face. In the royal viewing box, King Drax leaned forward, his expression confused. This was not Vesh combat technique. His daughter moved differently, economically, precisely. What is this? Lord Brax demanded. What fighting style is she using? The king had no answer. Below, the battle continued. Torque abandoned technique for raw power, raining blows that would have crushed Lyra if they had landed. But she remained elusive, always moving, never where his fists expected her to be. Stand and fight properly. Torque roared in frustration. I am fighting, Lyra replied calmly. Just not as you expect. She waited for Torque to commit to another powerful swing, then used his own momentum to pull him off balance. As he stumbled forward, she struck 3 rapid blows to key nerve points. Torque's right leg buckled. The crowd fell silent in shock. Sensing victory was possible, Lyra pressed her advantage. She didn't try to match Torque's strength, but exploited the openings his increasingly wild attacks created. When he lunged again, she stepped inside his guard and delivered a precisely targeted strike to a vulnerable point beneath his arm. Torque crashed to his knees, unable to rise, his breathing labored. Surrender, Lyra suggested quietly. Rage and disbelief warred on Torque's face. Never. He attempted one final desperate lunge. Lyra sidestepped smoothly and used her entire body's leverage to flip the much larger warrior over her shoulder. The technique, perfectly executed, slammed Torque onto his back with such force that the air exploded from his lungs. This time, he did not rise. The ceremonial master stepped forward, his own shock evident. The challenge is complete. Princess Lyra is victorious. As the stunned silence gave way to scattered applause, Lyra looked up at her father. For the first time in her life, she saw something new in his eyes. Respect. The royal palace buzzed with whispers in the days following Lyra's victory. Servants and nobles alike stole glances at the princess as she passed through the corridors. She walked taller now, her steps more confident despite her still slender frame. In the king's private council chamber, voices were raised in anger. It was human fighting techniques. Lord Krell slammed his fist on the table. The princess has been corrupted by her servant. This victory dishonors all Vesh traditions. King Drax sat silently, listening as his advisors argued. Lord Brax had left the palace in disgrace after his son's defeat, but not before demanding that Marcus be punished. The human must be executed. Another counselor insisted. His influence threatens everything we stand for. Strength through superior power is the Vesh way. The king finally raised his hand for silence. Bring my daughter to me, and her human. When Lyra entered with Marcus following behind, the council members glared at them with open hostility. Your victory has caused quite a disturbance, the king said to Lyra. These men believe your methods were dishonorable. Lyra stepped forward. Is victory not what matters most to the Vesh? Victory through strength. Krell spat. Not through tricks and deception. Was I not strong? Lyra challenged. I defeated a warrior twice my size. Using human techniques, Krell accused. Yes, Lyra nodded. Techniques developed by a species that survived despite lacking our physical advantages. Perhaps there is wisdom in learning from them. Marcus kept his eyes lowered, but his mind raced. He had taught Lyra more than combat skills over the past months. They had discussed human history, how Earth's civilizations had risen and fallen, how adaptation and innovation had allowed humans to thrive in countless environments. The human has poisoned your mind, Krell said. He must be executed, and you must be cleansed of his influence. Lyra's eyes flashed. If you execute him, you must execute me as well. I chose to learn what he offered. The king studied his daughter with newfound interest. You would defy your king and father. I would show you a better path, Lyra replied. Father, the Vesh have conquered many worlds through superior strength. But what happens when we meet a species stronger than ourselves? None exist, Krell scoffed. None that we know of, Lyra corrected. But the universe is vast. Marcus has taught me that true strength lies in adaptability, in learning many ways to solve problems. Marcus stepped forward, breaking protocol. Your Majesty, if I may speak. The counselors gasped at his audacity, but the king nodded, curious. On Earth, we study the rise and fall of empires, Marcus said. The ones that lasted longest weren't those with the strongest armies, but those that adapted and incorporated the strengths of the peoples they encountered. You compare our glorious empire to your primitive human kingdoms. Krell's hand moved to his weapon. No, Marcus replied calmly. I suggest that your empire could be even greater by learning from others rather than just conquering them. Lyra pulled out a data tablet and projected images into the air. These are military reports from the outer territories. 3 Vesh outposts have gone silent in the past month. The king frowned. I was not informed of this. Krell shifted uncomfortably. We are investigating. Likely just communication failures. Or something else. Lyra said. Something our traditional scouts couldn't detect. She showed more images, strange energy readings, unfamiliar ship configurations. These were captured by my own monitoring equipment, designed using human principles Marcus taught me. Something is approaching Vesh space, something that doesn't fight like we do. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. You believe we face a new enemy? The king asked. I believe we face a test, Lyra replied. One we cannot pass using strength alone. A young counselor named Frax, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. I've received similar reports from mining colonies near the outer rim. Ships vanishing without distress calls. It's concerning. The king's eyes narrowed as he considered this information. What do you propose, daughter? Let me form a new unit, Lyra said boldly. Soldiers trained in both Vesh and human combat techniques. A force that fights smarter, not just harder. Blasphemy, Krell shouted. Innovation, Lyra countered. The very thing that let me defeat Prince Torque. The king was silent for a long moment, weighing tradition against the unmistakable changes in his once weak daughter. Proceed, he said finally. You have 1 month to show results. As Krell and the older counselors stormed out in protest, Lyra exchanged a meaningful glance with Marcus. The real battle was just beginning. The royal command ship, Unyielding Might, hovered at the edge of Vesh space. On the bridge, Princess Lyra stood before a large viewing screen, watching as the strange alien vessels approached. They were unlike anything in Vesh records, smooth, dark shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They're not responding to any communication attempts, reported Commander Vrax, the young counselor who had supported Lyra's new military unit. Beside Lyra stood Marcus, no longer dressed as a servant, but wearing the newly created uniform of a human advisor. The past 3 months had transformed both their positions in the Vesh Empire. We've tried Vesh protocols, Lyra said. Let's try human ones. Marcus stepped forward. Send out varying frequency patterns based on mathematical sequences. It's how humans first attempted to communicate with potential alien intelligence. As the communication officers followed these instructions, King Drax entered the bridge. All Vesh present bowed deeply. The enemy fleet has destroyed 3 more outposts, the king announced grimly. Our traditional battle groups report their weapons have minimal effect. These creatures, the void shells, as our scouts call them, absorb energy attacks and seem to predict our standard attack formations. Lyra nodded. They study patterns and adapt. That's why we need to be unpredictable. The king turned to his daughter, his expression serious. Your special unit is ready. Yes, father. Team Adaption has trained and combined Vesh human tactics. We're prepared to engage. The news from across the Empire had grown increasingly dire. The unknown aliens systematically defeated every Vesh force sent against them, using the Vesh's own strength and predictability against them. Only Lyra's experimental unit had been held in reserve, waiting for this moment. We're getting a response, called out a communication officer. The aliens are transmitting some kind of pattern back to us. Marcus studied the sequence. It's a mathematical acknowledgement. They understand. Can we negotiate? The king asked. Lyra shook her head. I don't think so. Their actions suggest they're not interested in diplomacy. But at least we know they can receive and process our signals, which means we can confuse them, Marcus added. Your Majesty, we need to deploy Princess Lyra's unit immediately, while simultaneously broadcasting these interference patterns. The king hesitated only briefly before nodding. Proceed. Lyra turned to Marcus. You should stay here where it's safe. Marcus smiled. When have I ever done that? Together, they hurried to the launch bay where 50 specialized fighters waited. Each was piloted by a Vesh warrior who had trained under Lyra and Marcus, learning to combine Vesh strength with human adaptability and unconventional thinking. As they prepared to board the command fighter, King Drax appeared in the hangar. Daughter, he called out. Lyra turned, surprised to see her father in person. The king approached and did something unprecedented. He placed both hands on Lyra's shoulders, a gesture of respect between Vesh warriors. I did not see your true strength, he said quietly. I was blinded by tradition and my own narrow understanding of power. Lyra bowed her head. I found my strength because you gave me Marcus. Your gift was wiser than you knew. Perhaps, the king conceded. Now show these invaders what happens when Vesh strength combines with human ingenuity. The battle that followed would become legendary throughout the Empire. Lyra's fighters moved in seemingly chaotic patterns that confused the Void Shell's predictive systems. They used modified weapons that changed frequency with each firing, preventing the enemy from adapting. When one tactic stopped working, they immediately switched to another. From the command fighter, Lyra and Marcus directed the fluid battle strategy, constantly adjusting as they learned more about their enemy's capabilities. Just like our training sessions, Marcus said as they narrowly avoided enemy fire. Find the pattern, break the pattern, create a new pattern. Lyra smiled. You taught me well. When the last enemy ship retreated, the cheers across the Vesh fleet were deafening. For the first time in their long history, the Vesh had faced a superior force and emerged victorious through adaptation rather than overwhelming power. 1 month later, in the Great Hall of the Royal Palace, King Drax stood before representatives from both Vesh and human worlds. Today marks a new chapter for our empire, he announced. No longer will we merely conquer. We will learn. We will adapt. We will grow stronger through diversity of thought and approach. The king gestured to Lyra, who stepped forward with Marcus at her side. My daughter has shown us that true strength comes in many forms. Today, I name her not just my heir, but the first commander of the new combined forces. As applause filled the hall, Lyra spoke quietly to Marcus. From servant to advisor to ally, she said. Quite a journey. Marcus smiled, and it all started because a king gave his weak daughter a human servant. No, Lyra corrected, standing proud in her new commander's uniform. It started because that daughter chose to become a warrior.